For a lot of people in the United States, today is a big deal. Going to be watching the superb owl, which is kind of not a big deal in Moscow, but I'm delighted to welcome my next guest back to the show, John Mark Dougan. It's been so long since we've spoken. How are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm well. How are you?
I'm very well. It's great to see you, John. For people who haven't been watching or, I was thinking about this just the other day. You and I have known each other for about 8 years. Do you realize that?
Yeah. It's about a year after I came here is when I first started talking to you.
Correct. And that's been really a long time. For people who aren't familiar with you, I think it is important that we kind of go over your background a little bit, because not everybody knows why you are there in Moscow, Russia. And it is a very important story. We're going to be talking about how the fake news criminals at CBS, who are now being sued, and good job pointing that out to them, they're being sued for basically editing the video of Kamala Harris, having an impact on our election, an unjust and dishonest impact. Can you briefly, John, recount for everyone the story of your life and how you wound up there in Moscow, Russia?
Yeah, sure. I was a deputy sheriff. First I was a Marine, then I joined the police force. Ended up a deputy sheriff, and I blew the whistle on some corrupt colleagues. Well, when I say corrupt, I don't mean like they're taking bribes and stuff. I mean they were running around beating innocent people just brutally. Minorities, pretty much. They would beat them. They would make up false charges to arrest them so they could justify the beatings. And it was a pretty nasty thing. In fact, if you can Google Brent Ray-Ban, the Punisher, the Belgrade Punisher, and see exactly what I blew the whistle on. And the sheriff's office that I was working at, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, they were trying to cover this up. And so then I took it to the news media, and they certainly didn't appreciate that. So they basically made my life a living hell, because as a cop, you don't do that. And one thing, I switched departments, moved to Maine to try to get out from under their, thumb, but it still followed me, and I was still a rat, so I had to leave. And
well, let's just be careful about the language, John, because you were a rat according to them. According to me, you were the one brave guy in the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office who would stand up to this corruption. And I don't mean to correct you. Obviously, you know your story much better than me. But I don't want you to be self-deprecating for people who maybe don't.
When I say rat, I mean that's exactly how they viewed me.
Right.
I don't view myself as a rat at all. I view myself as somebody who, that just, it wasn't kosher with me. And if I had to do it all again and keep my life in pension, I would do it all again. So.
And it's more than just the pension, isn't it, John? Because you and I have known each other for years. I've spoken to you during difficult times when you couldn't see your family. Your mother died while you were in exile. You weren't able to go to her funeral. You've been smeared. Too. Sorry, your father too?
Yeah, my father too.
When did that happen?
2022, during the COVID pandemic. I guess they screwed up with the respirator or whatever they stick down your throat when you get COVID, and
oh my God.
They damaged his lungs. They chalked it up as a COVID death, but was it actually COVID? No, it was the damage that was done to his lungs. So
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So they've literally destroyed your life. Outlets like the New York Times say that you're a source of disinformation, but of course you're not.
The Washington Post as well.
What's that?
The Washington Post as well.
Yeah. So tell us what this latest dust-up is, because honestly, the thing that strikes me, and no offense to you, because obviously this is the most important story in your life, but realistically, in the terms of global news, this is 8 years ago. It's like, why do they care about John Mark Dougan anymore?
Well, look, I have some websites, and I have been leveraging. Well, let me tell you exactly how I got started. I had a YouTube channel, all right, and I made 14 trips to Donbass, and I was doing interviews with people that were affected by what was happening there. And every single one of these people that I would just randomly interview, they would tell me, no, this didn't start because Russia invaded Ukraine, right? I mean, to them, that's just like a garbage narrative. They told me that it started after the U.S. overthrew the duly elected president, um, and that was during the Maidan. That was in 2015 or 2014. I always get those two confused. And
2014, yeah.
yeah, 14. And then what happened is the people in Donbass, they did not want to go through with it because they have close ties to Russia. A lot of their family members live in Russia. And I mean, they're like brother and sister, right? So they said, look, we don't want to be a part of the West. We want to have our friendly relationship with Russia. And this got them, I guess you would say, labeled as a terrorist state by the United States because they weren't playing ball. And so the U.S. started supplying them with weapons, and they would take these weapons and they would bomb just civilians in the middle of the regions of Donbass, in Lugansk, in Donetsk, and all these other cities. And these were not strategic military targets. They would just drop bombs like in the middle of apartment complexes. Um,
You're
I know.
saying the United States was doing this?
Well, the
U.S.
Ukraine was doing.
backed, U.S. backed
Absolutely, yes, backed by the United
separatists.
States. And the funny thing about this is, well, there's nothing funny about it, but the ironic thing, let me clarify that, is the people that were primarily responsible for getting these weapons and dropping them, they were these very radical right-wing battalion groups, like Azov Battalion. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Absolutely.
And they were huge benefactors of the U.S. military, the Department of Defense, and all these weapons that they were sending over. And yet, and not only that, but there were videos done, okay, about how, and you can look this up for yourself. In Time did a video, the BBC did a video, the Guardian did a video, all about these um, basically right wing or even Nazi. Some people call them Nazi battalions, and they have huge support in Western Ukraine. Huge support. Um, and these were the benefactors of those weapons. And U.S. Congress moved to designate them as a terrorist organization in 2019, and yet they still kept sending them weapons. So it was, this was all a facade. This was all just lip service to try to distance themselves to who was bombing these civilians in Donbass. And I think it was 14,000 innocent people died in Donbass as a result of these bombings. And not just that, but if you go there and you see all the kids with missing limbs, because the Ukrainians love dropping these little butterfly, they're shaped like little butterflies, and they're mines. And they love dropping them on the playgrounds and stuff. I know a little kid named Nikita who was walking he was cutting through the playground from his house to go to his grandmother's house. And he got his leg blown off after stepping on one of these, right? And it's because the Ukrainians, the military, they just love littering the civilian areas with these. And, it's just absolutely terrible. So I was going there. I was talking to all of these people, and I was interviewing them, and YouTube kept flagging my videos as hateful content. And then the last straw, uh, I should mention the first flag I ever had on YouTube was a video I did about Andrew, was it Andrew Cuomo? Who was the governor of New York?
Yeah,
Andrew?
Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah. He put together this policy of COVID, where he would ship all these old COVID patients to nursing homes. And I did a video about this. I said, this is the stupidest policy I've ever heard of. This is going to kill a bunch of New Yorkers. And sure enough, it did, but it was the first flag from YouTube that I got on my videos. And then after that, it was like a cat and mouse game of, if I could behave myself long enough not to
Right.
get like second or third
You
warnings.
basically fell into the trap that many of us in the independent news world have fallen into. If you are actually interviewing people on the street, whether it's in Donbass or New York or wherever, you're revealing what's actually going on, and it runs counter to the narrative that we now learn USAID and other things like that have been paying to sort of astroturf this fake narrative. You were telling the truth. They hated that. Let me, not to interrupt where you're at in the story, but I want to ask you about this, because there's a lot of things that have happened to you in the 8 years that you and I have known each other. But maybe about a year ago, 6 months ago, this was in July of 2024, the BBC came after you. You and I had stopped doing shows because you told me your Rumble channel had been destroyed, your YouTube channel had been destroyed, and you were just going on to other things, trying to lay low there, getting just hassled by international news organizations. And then seemingly out of nowhere, they come with this story about a Bugatti and all kinds of stories where they said that you were using artificial intelligence to create websites that were loaded up with fake news. Was that true or false?
Well, so yes, I do utilize artificial intelligence, but here's how this works, okay? I have websites, and people that want their websites populated can contact me. And what I do is I take alternative news from all over. So, for instance, I'll use some Russian sources. I'll use like if I want to talk about things in New York, I'll use like the New York Post. I'll use all these different sources. And
Aggregating. You're a
yes,
blog, a news
exactly.
blog, aggregate like Drudge Report or Zero Hedge or any of these.
Exactly. And what it did, right, is instead of just reposting the content, like the algorithms, they don't like that. So, so my artificial intelligence rewrites the content, and it posts it differently on every single website.
And may I
Okay?
interject, because what you're describing could confuse listeners. This is a pretty standard function of any artificial intelligence. Somebody could go to that DeepSeek or ChatGPT or any of these, Gemini, load in any article and say, hey, I find this confusing. Give me a summary of this, paraphrase this, and it'll rewrite it in a way that you could say, write this like somebody who's from Louisiana, or write this like somebody from New York, and it'll interject, hey, yeah, these guys over here were doing something, and it does that. It will rewrite news. You're not doing anything tricky, really.
Yeah, but this isn't limited to artificial intelligence. Let me give you an example. When the New York Times comes out with a story, right, and everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon, what do? They rewrite the New York Times story and they publish it.
Paraphrasing. Yeah.
Yes. So this is not an AI thing. This is just an industry standard thing. But what they don't like is the fact that my content is coming from sources that they do not approve of.
Yeah. No, this is standard. They just don't want anybody disseminating news of any kind that isn't an approved source. So here we got
Yeah,
the New York Times, federal courts, maybe the last bulwark against Trump. So
yeah.
recently you had an interview with CBS News, and that was a really interesting outlet to select you because they're being sued by Donald Trump. Now, again, what caused them to contact you? You've been kind of, just in terms of looking at your career over the last 8 years, you've been relatively laying low, right?
Well, not really. I mean,
Oh,
if not just the BBC, but actually Google the Washington Post. You can Google my name with the Washington Post, and you'll see like one of the articles that they came out that I was using deep fakes and
this
this
was in
one.
October.
Yeah. Hey, look at
American
that handsome
creating
guy.
deep fakes targeting Harris. I
Boy.
need to sign into this. I think I
Uh,
did pay for it.
oh, you did?
I think so. Let
Uh,
me just get signed in here.
yeah. So while you're signing in, I'll give you a gist of this. They were analyzing some websites that I had, and look, there are some stories that have appeared on a couple of my sites that aren't 100% accurate. Whatever. This is like anything. Um, for instance, they cite the story about Zelensky. He had two of his friends go out and buy two yachts for him. Okay.
Yeah, they didn't like that story.
Yeah.
Is there evidence to support that? It seems possible.
Well, they kind of debunked it. Okay. And my point is, I don't know what it ended up on my website. Is it true or not? Well, I think the American government has a duty to at least investigate where this money is going. Maybe he bought them. Who knows, right? Um, but this money is certainly going someplace. Um, and in this CBS interview, I said to the interviewer, if a if a and we'll just call it a bad story, okay? We'll just every news outlet has some bad story that comes up on their site. For instance, Russia bombed the Nord Stream, right? This
Yes.
this is the most outlandish story that you could even imagine, that Russia is going to destroy its own pipeline
Right.
and
It's like me going to
lose
the bank, drawing out all my own money and lighting it on fire in the backyard.
exactly, right? And what I said to the interview on CBS is like, you know what? Yeah, maybe some of these my stories are just as honest as your stories, right? Meaning, yeah, maybe some mistakes have made. I was like, but mine are more honest because I encourage people to investigate. I'm encouraging the government to investigate. Whereas if a story like, let's say, the Nord Stream was bombed by Russia, appears on their website, and people question it, what do? They call them conspiracy theorists, and they tell them there's no need to investigate because the US government tells it exactly like it is.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and you
you
got
know,
into a substantial back and forth with the CBS people about this. I agree with your position. The one thing that I would offer that might have improved your argument was that, hey, you're basically trying to tell them, look, no news outlet gets things right 100% of the time. And so they've found a story of yours where they're pointing to evidence that contradicts the way that you reported it. All right, that's something we could investigate further. But why are they so interested in your tiny reach and your tiny story when, as you've pointed out, their own news outlet and other much larger news outlets have been spreading information that is equally inaccurate, if not more inaccurate, but they're making all this noise about John Mark Dougan? It does seem quite odd.
well, you say little reach, but the fact of the matter is, not only was I using artificial intelligence to write the articles, but I was figuring out what keywords were promoting these articles, and I would use artificial intelligence to write the articles utilizing these keywords. So, for instance, if Joe's news outlet had a report on drones, right? I would utilize Google to figure out which keywords drew the biggest audience to that article, and then I would use those keywords in my own article, and I would use them in my own tags. And this resulted, I had just started these websites I started using AI to do these websites in, let's see, October of 2023. And by the time the election rolled around, the month before the election is when my websites all got deleted. But I was reaching 60, no,
Well, who
30.
deleted them, though?
So because of these articles here, because of these articles saying that I worked for Russian intelligence, they utilized those, and they went to companies like the domain registration companies, and they said, look, this guy's a Russian asset, and the domain registration companies would just revoke all my domains.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, free speech, baby. But I was getting 63 or 64 million views every single month.
So you basically used artificial intelligence to sort of figure out something about Google that's not immediately apparent to the average user, use that to boost up your sites, and then suddenly these sites were getting lots of attention. Now, another thing that they were focused on in the CBS interview was, why are you doing this? And it seems obvious to me that if you have ads on these sites or if you are monetized in some way,
No monetization. Why did I do it? Because you know what? And this goes back to my YouTube channel. They deleted my YouTube channel because I interviewed two little old ladies in Donbass. And these two little old ladies told me that the Ukrainian military held them at gunpoint for 30 days, didn't let them out of the basement. And when one of their 10-year-old boys fled the basement to try to go get some water, that 10-year-old boy got shot in the back. And this was hate speech, according to YouTube, and they deleted my channel.
So the fact that you're reporting on this stuff that's going on, that's so sinister, John, because you're the only one who's getting to these people. These old ladies locked in this is really Nazi stuff.
Yeah.
They're killing 10-year-old boys for going to get water and things like that.
Yep. So, whatever. So I decided, well, if I can't, and they didn't mess with my Rumble channel. Here's why I didn't keep going. And now I think I'm going to reverse my decision on this. But I was getting 50 views or 100 views on my Rumble channel for videos that I was getting tens of thousands of views on YouTube. And, I would spend a lot of time putting these interviews together, making them, and it just didn't seem worth it to me to get 50 views or even 100 views if I'd spend a week doing a video, and I'd spend thousands of dollars going to Donbass just to interview these people.
Right.
It didn't seem
not sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. So I decided that I would move to websites, and frankly speaking, I'm lazy and I don't like writing myself. And in order to have a website that has good turnover, you need a lot of content. And where do you get that content? And it has to be fresh content, and it can't be you can't just scrape a website and post those articles, because Google will delist your website as someone who's just stealing content. So
Right.
I decided to use artificial intelligence to rewrite content.
Pretty smart.
Yeah. So, and this is why I went from 0 views to 64 million in about a year.
So that would seem to have caught somebody's attention, because that's a rapid rise. And whoever is monitoring this stuff, which, you see, this is, I think, what we're starting to realize with these revelations coming out of the Department of government efficiency and stuff, is that we've got these entrenched bureaucrats who are, sending billions of dollars around. And it really is not just about USAID and this thing got money from this thing. This is a network. And the fact that CBS contacted you as a result of this all happening, I don't think is a coincidence. I mean, this is the permanent state basically reaching out to try to shut you down using all of its different resources. Where, how does CBS come to know that you're having this, outsized, unusual growth? I mean, they sort of, I guess, can tell when somebody is having normal growth.
Dude, they did a lot of research. I mean, there were somebody wrote a 32-page thesis on this.
What do you mean? On what?
On my websites. They wrote a 32-page thesis on how it was like a threat. They called me, if you Google John Dougan copy cop, yeah.
Russia-linked copy cop uses LLMs. It's funny, the Washington Post, even though I pay for it, it won't let me log in because I don't have email on this computer. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is that? That's some cybersecurity thing they're doing.
Yeah, and this is basically, they didn't like the fact that I was taking sources from, taking sources from on the ground here in Russia, rewriting that content and posting them to the websites. They did not like that at all. So they called me copy cop.
Copy cop.
Yeah. They said that my news was reaching, the floor of Congress. And honestly, good.
Right.
Good, because, and like I said to the interviewer, good. And I hope they investigate every last article, and I hope they investigate where all this money is going. Look, if the articles are wrong, okay, they're wrong. But if they're wrong on some minor factual details where this money is still being stolen, okay, maybe
Right.
the yacht names, maybe they were different yacht names, or maybe there were different yachts, or maybe it wasn't yachts, maybe there were jets or
I've heard
villas
mansions.
or something.
I have heard a lot around this.
Oh yeah, well they blame me for those articles too, which is so stupid.
But still, John, I mean, compared to the Washington Post or something like that, you don't have the kind of reach that they have. It's ridiculous how they won't allow me to log into this damn thing. I mean, I pay for it and I just can't get to it. No, we're going to do it. I'm annoyed now.
Yeah. So, I always encourage people to do their own research. I encourage the people to demand the government to figure out where in the hell all this money is going. And like I said to the interviewer, well, it's strange that Zelensky said that he doesn't know where 100, not million, but 100 billion dollars is gone.
Right.
That's a hell of a lot of. I mean, I can't lose that much money. I mean, where did it go?
Well, so John, people watching us right now could potentially get lost in the details of this or that, but the bottom line is what you're saying is they're more worried about potential inaccuracies in what you've written rather than the fact that there's the recipient of the money saying 100 billion is missing. Why are they doing all this research into your comparatively small reach news articles versus actually saying, hey, now wait a minute. This is true. Where is all this money going? So here we go. American creating deep fakes targets Harris, works with Russian intel. Now, is this true or false? Because if this is false, they're more guilty than you are.
That is so false. And, the funny thing is, here's the funny thing. The interviewer says, oh, but why don't you work for Russian intel? You're in an apartment in Moscow, surrounded by a room full of
Right.
servers. Well, I got two computers over here. Yeah,
No, I
it's in
saw
a
you
small
showed it.
server rack.
It's a rack with $3,000 worth of very minor stuff in it. But
Yeah,
it's your expertise that's impressive. The fact that you were able to figure out how to use commercial AI applications to figure out these things from open source data to create a website that could become this successful quickly. You've shown over the years a great acumen for creating really smart websites that have helped do a lot of things. Let me take you back in your timeline for a minute, because it's intrigued me for years that the apparatus, the news, the FBI, the international, whatever it is, globalist, whatever, is super duper interested in John Mark Dougan. Now, when you and I first met, it was an interview that we had conducted where you told me that you'd been contacted by a person who you later realized was Seth Rich. And I even went to the park where Seth Rich went and met you and handed you a thumb drive, correct?
yeah. Well, and I've always stipulated that I don't 100% know
He
if
didn't
it was Seth
identify
or Rich,
himself as
because
Seth Rich,
it was late at
but
night. It was like 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning. He never told me his name, but it was in the area where he lived, and it just so happened to be a bunch of those emails. So
well, and he was
what
asking you to
it
create a
was?
whistleblower website where people
Yes,
could
he did.
anonymously release content. He had sent it to you in an encrypted message,
Wicker. It was
Wicker,
called Wicker.
and the
And
attached file became corrupted. So you said to him, "Hey, I don't have the file." And
well,
what always,
no. A couple of days after he sent it to me, my home got raided by the FBI.
but wait a minute, because when you told me in the original interview, which I've
No,
reposted, and you actually have forgotten details of what you said to me in the interview 8 years ago. I'm not accusing you of doing anything wrong. That's normal. You haven't thought about this for 8 years. But when you gave the interview in 2016 or 17, you
mhm,
told me that he had sent you a Wicker message and
that's
that the
correct.
attachment was corrupted somehow. You weren't
No,
able to
that's what I
access the
told
files.
him. No, and you can go back and read it.
Okay.
The FBI came in, they seized all my stuff, and I contacted him and I said, "Look, those messages were corrupted. I'm going to come get them," because I didn't trust Wicker after that, and I wanted the messages, and I didn't want to scare him that the FBI was poking around.
Okay.
So so they actually seized all my stuff, but
From the
I went
Wicker.
back. Yeah, but I went back to him. I told him the premise was that they were corrupted.
But doesn't it seem to you, John? I mean, you did a lot of police work and stuff. If somebody was in Seth Rich's position and they wanted to blow the whistle on the most powerful politicians in Washington, D.C., and somebody they didn't know, you, said, "Hey, there's some problem with this incredibly scandalous information that you gave me," doesn't it seem weird that that person would come and meet you rather than freak out and say, "I'm never going to talk to that guy again"? I feel like they were setting you up and
I
that
don't know.
Seth Rich was a part of that setup.
It could have been. I don't know, and I'm not going to speculate because I don't know the truth. And
But okay, I had my details wrong. But in other words, through the course of him sending you these messages from the DNC, the FBI found out that you were in receipt of this stuff, and that's when they came and got you because you were ostensibly going to create technology or enable the release of this stuff. They were trying to stop you. So then when Seth Rich gave you that thumb drive in the park, you then later saw the news, saw that this guy had been killed, and you said, "Hey, that looks exactly like the guy who gave me the thumb drive in the park."
well, that was I didn't even realize it until like 9 months after I had gotten to Moscow, and that was April. I arrived here April 7th of 2016, April 7th. And then I set up a website, and then
But there's
um,
another important detail.
Yes.
Prior to meeting Seth Rich, you had created PBSO Talk, which was a
That's correct.
website where Palm Beach County sheriffs and deputies, people in the police, could anonymously upload evidence to blow the whistle on the police because you had revealed that they were beating up minorities, they were stealing things from the evidence room, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is what got you run out of the police force. But during the course of the operation of PBSO Talk, isn't it correct that a detective from the Jeffrey Epstein investigation uploaded videos to your website that had been seized from Epstein's house?
No. I mean, well, kind of. Let me just clarify it. This is a guy that I had worked with, Joe Ricari, and he came over to my apartment in 2010 with a box full of stuff and asked me to burn it.
Wow, this is even more damning than I realized. Okay, so he
Yeah.
came over to your apartment and asked you to burn evidence?
No, burn it to a drive.
Oh, to a DVD. Right. So he wanted you to save the evidence.
That's correct. Yeah, because he was afraid that it was going to be destroyed, and he was afraid that it was going to be destroyed by the federal government.
Why did he tell you why he thought that?
No, and we didn't really get into a lot of detail. I didn't want to ask too many questions.
Right.
As far as I was concerned, I was just a banker with a safety deposit box for him to lock his stuff in.
Okay, so he comes to your apartment. What's the time frame of this meeting with Joe Ricari relative to the cops raiding your place?
Oh, dude, it was years before. This was like 2000. I think it was. I think it was sometime in either late 2009 or early 2010.
Wow, so you had that evidence for quite a while.
Yeah, yeah.
And he knew that you had PBSO Talk, or you hadn't created that yet?
Oh, everybody knew I had PBSO Talk.
Okay,
And
so he comes over to ask you to preserve the evidence.
yeah. And, because all the guys knew I had PBSO Talk, I had everybody contacting me as a whistleblower. I had people dropping off documents about the sheriff stealing guns from evidence. I had people dropping off documents about the chief deputy's son, Michael Gauger, getting arrested for attacking a black cop and calling him the N-word, where he was um, where mysteriously that police report no longer exists in
Wow.
the system anymore. Yeah,
And this
dude,
guy's still the sheriff, Rick Bradshaw.
Rick Bradshaw is still the sheriff. Well, he wanted to retire. His wife wanted to retire. Coincidentally, in the year that Epstein was arrested, okay, um, when he was put in the Palm Beach County Jail, where he really didn't spend any time. It's ironic that the sheriff bought a $1.1 million house,
Huh.
and he bought like a $600,000 house on the beach in North Carolina, and another three or four hundred
Wow.
thousand dollar house up in the mountains in North Carolina.
But he's buddies
Um,
with Trump, this guy. He's super entrenched.
who Bradshaw?
Yeah.
Well, look, I don't think they're actually buddies. I think that he's the chief law enforcement officer in Palm Beach County where Trump lives. So there has to be cooperation. And it just is what it is. The people of Palm Beach County keep voting to put this corrupt piece of crap back in office because and I know exactly why. Because all the old people, they vote, they get cards. They get cards from their homeowner community exactly who to vote for. They don't know the issues. They just take these
Right.
cards to the voting booth and they fill it out, and that's
Right.
it. And Bradshaw is involved with a guy by the name of Jim Staluppi, and Staluppi was like he used to money launder cash for the Colombo crime family, and um, for instance, When the sheriff had to buy new patrol cars, do you think he bought them at a dealership in Florida? Nope. He would Jim Staluppi had car dealerships like in like mob-owned car dealerships up in New Jersey, and Bradshaw would order all the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office cars from him and have them trucked down. So this was how the sheriff managed to stay sheriff.
Wow.
Yeah, dude. There's a reason Palm Beach County is called Corruption County.
It's not John Staluppi?
Yeah,
John Staluppi.
yeah.
So here's an article about yachts owned by John Staluppi. James Bond inspired super yachts of John Staluppi. Is that him?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Brooklyn. Sorry, I said New Jersey, but
Okay,
okay,
wow.
no.
He quit school at 16 to start working as a mechanic at a local GM dealership in Brooklyn.
Yeah. Go ahead. Now, here's what you won't see on this website. Google John Staluppi, Colombo crime family. So,
Now, the Colombo crime family, was that John Gotti?
I have no idea. But see, this is,
Worth $400 million.
yeah.
Here's
And then,
the Palm Beach Post. The man once accused of mob ties he bought a site license for the Double D strip club.
I have no idea what that is.
This is, Palm Beach Post reporting about the latest strip club news. Company managed by a car and yacht magnate, John Staluppi, once described by the FBI as a member of the Colombo crime family, bought the Double D Ranch and Saloon.
Now, Google Sheriff Bradshaw buys steak dinners for John Staluppi. This came out on my website, and this was a huge freaking.
He's chided for using tax money for meals.
Yeah. And I don't think they mentioned my website. Dude, the Palm Beach Post hated my website because I was scooping them on everything.
Well, so see, that's the thing. I mean, they obviously have it in for you because you are revealing stories that they don't want revealed. I don't know anything about this guy, John Staluppi, nor am I making excuses for him, but it's probable that somebody who has been able to succeed in the area of business that he has chosen, maybe he was helping the FBI, had help from the FBI. I don't know if you ever got involved in undercover work when you were...
The FBI is corrupt as hell in Florida.
Everywhere.
Sheriff Bradshaw hired the, what do they call it? The resident agent in charge of Palm Beach County's field office. He hired his son, no questions asked.
Wow.
And when that same resident agent's wife got caught up in a steroid sting, because she's a bodybuilder and she was buying steroids like mad, and she got arrested. Well, that arrest disappeared. It disappeared. And, so now the sheriff's office, now the FBI does anything that Rick Bradshaw wants.
Wow.
Yeah.
So see, you're reporting on all this stuff and they hate it that you're doing that. Similar to how I've been reporting on the FBI infiltrating the Southern District of New York, U.S. District Court, and how the FBI infiltrated Twitter before Elon Musk bought it. When you get right to the heart of whatever it is that they're doing that they don't want to talk about, this is the treatment that you get. And it's interesting. Yeah. So how did CBS come to contact you on this most recent? Have they released their interview yet? Because you had your side of it that you recorded on your Rumble channel.
Yeah, and because I don't honestly believe that they will release what I said, because it's a damning indictment of the media. And if you watch the first part of my video, if you can go to Rumble and show it, if you watch the first part of the video, it's all the disclaimer that CBS 60 Minutes tries to push on you, and
Yeah.
my refusal to agree to it.
Well, it was interesting because you see, I mean, it was so obvious what they were trying to do to you, where they have some producer and the journalist kind of on the phone with you, trying to get you to agree that you're not going to broadcast any aspect of the interview. Now, one sticking point that I noticed that might have helped your argument, they were trying to get you to agree to not broadcast their intellectual property. But it seemed to me that you were actually recording the video and audio of the interview with your own camera from a different angle, and you weren't going to do anything with their intellectual property. You were creating
That's
your
correct.
own. Yeah, see, that
It
wasn't
was
articulated to them. That might have shut them up a little bit more, but it wouldn't have, because they were just trying
they
to
do.
trick you.
They even said it. They even said it.
Yeah,
They said it in there. And I mean, Christ, it's my apartment. It's not like I was in some studio. We
right.
filmed in my apartment, and they knew that I had my own recording stuff, but they said, "Well, it's our interview, and so we should have the right." And I said, "You know what?" And they said, you can broadcast parts that we've already shown on my channel,
No,
but
I
you just
know.
can't
They were just
broadcast
being
anything else.
completely evasive and stupid.
And I said, well, if you lie about what I say, if you take something out of context, right, then you're saying that I can't broadcast the parts in context.
Right.
And they're
Now,
like,
just
well,
so
you
we
can.
understand, John, this is your apartment here. Was that person walking around a friend of yours, or is that somebody from CBS?
It's my assistant, actually.
Got it. Okay. So they basically just said, hey, we're going to record you on Zoom or something, and then you had a separate camera recording
No,
you sitting there.
they had an entire camera crew here.
Oh, they did? So they sent over
Yeah,
their own people.
they had 3 different cameras for 3 different views. They had
Wow.
microphones, lighting. Yeah.
And listen, the reason they do that, the 3 different views, is so that they have as many options as possible for cutting
Absolutely.
around your words. It's not to make you look glamorous. It's to give them as many opportunities to cut and make it appear seamless.
Right. And you know what? Here's the sad thing. I actually really liked talking to Andy Court. He seems like an old school news guy, and if he would have done the interview, I think it would have been much better because I had this Cecilia Vega. It started off with Cecilia Vega,
Right.
and from the beginning, I could tell that she was throwing out these ambush style gotcha questions,
Yeah.
looking for nothing but a soundbite. She wasn't interested in what I had to say. She just wanted to get me on video with these
She's
questions
putting
like
words in your mouth, basically.
exactly like they asked one of their questions was, John, is there anything you wouldn't lie about? Any person,
Right.
any incident? Well, how do you answer that? If you say no, no, there's nothing I wouldn't lie about. But if you say yes, that means you lie about everything except
Right.
for a few things. I mean, you can't.
Well, it's
This
when did
was,
you stop beating your wife, is what she's asking you.
yes, these were not journalistic questions. This was a prosecutorial
Entrapment approach.
investigation. Absolutely.
The
And
other
that's
thing I
not
found super
journalism.
interesting about it, so in your experience in the military and in the police, it seemed obvious, or at least to me it did, that you've had certain training in interrogating people, right?
Yes.
Because you used some specific language, I can't remember right now, but you were describing the tactics where what you've just described, it was an interrogation tactic to try to get you to admit something, and you knew that.
Yeah. Yes. Leading questions, false assumptions. Yeah. You know what? I went and I wrote all of her questions. Hold on. Uh, I made a list of all of her questions, and oh no, shoot, and categorized them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, and I think I have lost. No, I didn't lose him, do I?
But so they haven't given you any indication of when or if they're actually going to release this. And by the way, we don't even know. CBS could easily contact somebody like you and say we want to do an interview to try to do something on behalf of the FBI or somebody like that. And if they fail to get you to admit whatever it is they're trying to do, maybe they do nothing with the interview.
Yeah, well, I don't think CBS would have gone through that. But you know what? I was actually hoping that this would be the only reason I agreed to do the interview with CBS is because it was CBS 60 Minutes. And I thought, maybe, just maybe it would be a fair interview. And they really wanted to know my side of the story and why I was doing what I was doing, how I was doing what I was doing, and exactly what I was doing. But that wasn't it. So, like, who do you work for? Do you work for the Russians in any capacity? It's a loaded question. Let's see. Let's talk about one of the stories you did. Why did you make that up? That's what she said. And of course, that's a presupposition of guilt, and it's a loaded question.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you answer a question? Why did you make that up?
Let me take you back to this BBC thing, because I remember there were a lot of problems with this. This had to do with a receipt from a Bugatti that was purchased in Paris or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that anything about this immediately screams that it was fake. I think that they had said the fact that it was written in English indicated that it was fake, but I don't know that that's correct. I would presume a Bugatti dealership in Paris is ready to conduct business in English if that's the only common language. Like if you don't speak French, I'm not surprised that they have somebody at the Bugatti dealership who speaks English if you want to buy a $4 million car. How did they determine that this was not a legitimate Bugatti receipt?
Well, you see, that's a very interesting point that you made, because if you buy a high-end car here in Russia,
Yeah.
you'll get a receipt in Russian and in English.
Right, because it's international buyers
Because
and
it's the
not
international
everybody.
language. Absolutely.
Right, I'm sure
So
if I
everything
walked
is pretty
into
much.
a Bugatti dealership in Moscow, they have somebody in there who could speak English and is probably from New York.
Well, if you go to any high-end car dealership in Moscow, they all speak English
I'm
very
sure.
fluently. So, because I mean, look, there's a lot of rich foreigners that live here. A lot. There's more money in Moscow than any other country than any other city in the entire world, and I think even probably more so than Dubai. Um, at least that was true 10 years ago. I don't know if it's still true, but there's a ton of money
Nobody
here.
doubts that, but just back on this. I mean, again, it's amazing that we have, John, again, not to insult you, but you are a small fish in terms of news compared to Reuters, the New York Times, the Washington Post. Yet each of these things feel compelled to counteract whatever story you publish. It just seems so strange. I mean, someone with you're not Cy Hirsch or something. It's not like John Mark Dougan speaks and the news world listens. So it seems very strange that there would be such a focused effort on counteracting.
They don't do it because they're threatened by me. They're doing it so they can say, look, here's this guy in Russia. Look, he's clearly helping the Russians. And so this is a Russian disinformation operation. Hey, now we can call any article that we don't like a Russian disinformation operation and have that article pulled by Facebook, or have their domain revoked by the registrar, or there's all sorts of freaking games that they can play with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's, in other words, they just basically, there is evidence, somebody's got this receipt, and they just say there's no evidence and that the receipt is fake. But how do we know the receipt is fake? Did anybody contact this dealership? Did anybody?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, that was just some news that was rewritten on one of my sites, and whether or not there's truth to it, I mean, I don't know. Whether or not there's truth to any article on my site or any article, because they come from these sources all over. And for all I know, the New York Post could be writing some nonsense about something, and this is rewritten to one of my websites, and it's fake. Who knows? Probably not if it came from the New York Post, but if I was taking my articles from the New York Times, then there's a very good chance that that is absolutely fake. So who knows? Who knows? If but this is like any journalist. If any journalist wrote that the Russians bombed the Nord Stream pipeline, well, it was clearly fake. They got that information from the New York Times. What are they supposed to do? They can't vet everything themselves, and I can't vet everything myself either.
I respectfully would offer that I think it's the wrong argument that you're making, because it's not they're fake, so if you have something, or they're inaccurate, so if you have something inaccurate, it's okay. The question is, why are they so concerned about what you are writing? And why are they writing so many false things about you? So in other words, somebody came up with this invoice from Bugatti, and somebody created it. Either someone who wanted to make a fake news story, or somebody working at a Bugatti dealership, or somebody created it. They're saying that this thing accurately has the address of the Bugatti dealership in Paris. I mean, frankly, it's kind of a lot of details to go through here. I mean, is this stuff real? Is a trim part, rear light, gunpowder?
I'm sure
Are these
it's probably real, but the reason they go through this, the reason they want to link it to me, is because so they can say, no, Zelensky's not stealing all that money. No, let's keep sending him more.
Oh, I understand. But the point that I'm trying to get to is, in other words, if this just said Bugatti 4 million, okay. But if brake calipers in black is an 11,700 euro charge, how would a person making this fake document know that? This is a lot of detail in this document that they just said, oh, the dealership denied it. Well, okay, how do we know the dealership isn't involved in some money laundering scheme where they just produce an invoice and somehow they're getting there's more investigation to be done here than just saying John Mark Dougan is fake, but yet they all rush to that. That's the most conspicuous aspect of this to me, that we've got these gigantic news organizations super focused on trying to demonstrate that you are working for the Russians. That's a claim that has no evidence and isn't true.
That is stupid. If you saw my bank account balance.
Look, here's what I would say, and here's what I would offer to viewers of Crowdsource the Truth. Because anytime, John, anybody turns on the TV or the internet, or they're looking at somebody like you or me, there's all kinds of allegations. Just in this chat here, some idiot on Facebook asked, is it true that Crowdsource the Truth is owned by George Soros? That is not true. But it's also absurd on its face. Like, why would I be getting sued for 8 years? And like you're saying, if you were working for the Russians, this is a question for viewers of Crowdsource the Truth to ask themselves. If John were working for the Russians or doing something illegal or untoward, we look back in the history of Crowdsource the Truth and all the people who I've discovered or who I've alleged have lied to me, there's strong evidence to prove that those people did things that were dishonest. Nothing like that has ever happened with you. It's one of the reasons why I value our interaction, because whatever doubts anybody might ever have about you, you've never done anything to try to set me up. You've never done anything that I've been able to identify as a lie. I think, were not forceful enough with the CBS people. Like when they asked you, why did you lie about this or that? You responded to them in the way that you're responding now, which isn't bad. But in other words, what I'm saying is, somebody tells you this is false. How did they determine that this is false? There's a lot of detail here. Even just knowing the correct address for the Bugatti dealership in Paris represents some degree of setup that somebody would have gone to create this. I mean, does this match an invoice in terms of the placement of the Bugatti logo, the fonts. There's a lot of investigation that could be done here to just say we called the dealership and they said it's false. No, that's not a proper investigation.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, the Russians take great pains to be quiet about everything that they do if they
Right.
do something. So if I was working for the Russian government, I certainly wouldn't be on a talk show with you, a podcast.
People would
about
doubt that. They would say that your purpose is to subvert this and all this and that. But I mean, for years we've been hearing that people are working for the Russian government. And it turns out that most of those people are working for the FBI. You got chased out of your life. Who would choose to do what you're doing? It doesn't make sense what they're saying.
I don't know. But here, I got $97 in my Russian bank account.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, so is there, John, is there a way, do you still have your book for sale? Is there a way that people watching can support you if they want to do that?
Now I just do crypto. That's it.
What do you mean?
Cryptocurrency.
Investing?
No, I like if because it's a pain in the ass. So if anybody wants to deal with me, they have to do it in crypto. So
Got it.
But I will say this: if anybody wants news content from other sources, like real news content,
Right.
content, like talking about the war and stuff, push to their website. I'm happy to include you on my list.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, being a news aggregation agency is completely legitimate business. I mean, there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. Like all these newspapers that are owned by, pardon the heater, it makes a lot of noise. All these news agencies that are owned by USA Today, I forget the name of it, but at some point they bought up all these local newspapers. And they're basically an aggregator. They push all their news out through these local papers.
Too easy. Yeah. It's very easy to do.
Right.
So,
Dan Mazia gives us the excellent advice from his mom that not everything requires a response. It's a good point, Dan. Thank you for that.
Yeah, well,
Well, John, I always like having you on. I got to get this heater fixed. I'm really sorry about the noise. I always enjoy having you on. Yeah, I imagine you're not going to be watching the superb owl here today, even though Trump will be there and it will be interesting. People can follow you on X at Real Bad Wolf. They can also subscribe to your Rumble channel, which is also Bad Wolf. Anything else you want to tell us before we wrap up today?
No, that's pretty much it. But if anybody wants to contact me, my Telegram is also Bad Wolf, and I got my personal contact there. I got my I got like a little news channel. I only have like 4,500 people, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. But if you got something, if you have something you want to put out, you're scared to you're scared to put it out yourself because you think you'll be retaliated against by some government somewhere. Contact me in a secret chat on Telegram, and we'll make arrangements to get it, and I'll do it for you because I'm untouchable here in Russia. You got something, I'm happy to put it out for you.
But that's what I wanted to ask you. You've reminded me. There was one last question. It's a little bit of an overstatement to say that you're untouchable, but what I got from the conversation with CBS, and which I essentially agree with, you're sort of civil lawsuit proof while you're there in Russia. It would be remarkably difficult for CBS to hold you accountable for a contract under U.S. law while you reside in Moscow. Isn't that what you meant?
Yeah, because they don't, what is it called? Not the Hague. Maybe it is the Hague. Well, there's some international laws that Russia doesn't subscribe to anymore.
Right.
I think it is the Hague. Where basically, I mean, what are they going to do? They're going to come after me here?
But they can't even take you to The Hague. CBS can't take you to The Hague. They're never going to be able to serve you with a civil lawsuit. So that just goes to the next question of what the hell are they trying to get you to agree to in the first place? It's not like they could come sue you if you violate it.
Well, they want to sue. They want it so that if I do agree to it and I put it out on social media, they
You
can go
look
to these social media
underhanded.
channels and say, "Look, he agreed and he did it
Right.
anyways."
Right. Yeah,
So,
so from
but
that
whatever.
standpoint, you handled yourself very well because you told them many times that you're not going to lie to them and that you want it in writing. That, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I do feel I did put out the content. I agreed not to put out the content before they aired their piece, and I honestly I feel a little bit bad that I did. However, that agreement was under the understanding that this was a good faith interview. This
Right.
wasn't them trying to shaft me, which indeed they absolutely
Clearly
tried to
they
do.
were.
This was not any real good faith interview. This was just a scam on their part.
Absolutely. And you're going to be watching very closely the Trump CBS lawsuit. He's just upped it to 20 billion. I mean, it seems like a huge amount. We'll see what
Did you
happens
hear what
there.
I said to that? Did you
I
hear
did, but
what I
remind us.
Yeah, so when we were talking about them, why I won't agree, and I said to Cecilia Vega, I said, because you know what, I don't want you guys doing a reverse Kamala Harris editing job on me,
Yeah.
and she goes, "Oh, touche," right?
Because
I
wasn't
mean,
that
dude,
her?
they
Or
know
she was
they're.
directly involved, wasn't she? No, that
Oh,
was a
I don't
guy.
know.
No, but you're right. I remember that when she said touche. So they know they're liars.
Yeah, they know they're freaking scumbags. They know they're scumbags. Um, but I thought it was. After the interview, I hemmed and hawed on it a couple of days. I was like, man, should I put it out before they do? And then in the end, I was like, well, you know what? They're going to do their best to make me look like a craphead. I better just preempt it.
Yeah.
So who
Yeah.
knows what they're? I don't know what they're going to do with this interview. Whatever. I
I
don't
think
really
they were
care.
just razzing you, man. They're trying to.
No, they wouldn't
There's.
have spent all that money, dude. They must have spent a lot of money sending that whole camera crew here. I
I
mean, it was a
agree.
Russian
But in
camera
other
crew,
words,
but
you are a long-standing target. I think because of information that they believe that you have, whether you do or not, about Epstein and these other bigger crimes that they're concerned with. Like, we still don't know what happened to that guy, Joe. What was the detective's name who came to your house who
Ricari.
died at 50? Ricari. Nobody knows what really happened to him, right?
Yeah, and dude, I was shocked because when a journalist called me up in 2019 and asked me questions about him and then told me he was dead, I was like, what the hell? I was shocked because nobody had ever told me. None of my friends wrote to me and said that he died, and I was that was a shock to me. He was a fit dude. He was in good shape.
And this was well before COVID, too, right? What was the
Yeah,
cause
this
of
was
death?
well, they told me in 2019 that he died. Nobody ever told me his cause of death, and I can't remember. I think maybe he died in 2018 or
Yeah,
I don't remember when they said he died, but it had been a while, and I
2018,
was 2018. Yeah,
May or something.
yeah.
End of May.
So,
Very
anyways,
strange. Well, listen, John, thanks for joining us tonight. Enjoy your evening there in Moscow. I hope everybody has a wonderful, superb owl, and we'll continue to look at this as it develops. Don't forget, everybody, you can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, or subscribestar.com, or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Thanks very much, John, and everybody for watching. Das Vidanya.
Bill Sudanya.